So today we're going to be talking about our post-combine updated tiered rookie rankings. We do tiered rankings at the Dynasty Rewind. If you want access to our full rankings, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. We're also offering free 7-day trials right now. So come hang out for a week. So Nate, let's start with tier one. Tier one's small, but that's okay.
It is, because there's not many players like the guys that are in tier one. Number one, Caleb Williams, a truly impressive quarterback prospect. There's been a lot of discourse over the past couple months of prospect fatigue with Caleb Williams, and the fact that he played in a terrible USC offense where he was always chasing 40-plus points a game. That defense gave up over 40 points a game, Mike. And Caleb Williams out there looking like he's playing hero ball. I wonder why. Because he didn't have the wide receivers that he was used to having when he was at Oklahoma or the year before with Jordan Addison at USC.
Yeah.
No offense to Brendan Rice and Taj Washington, but right now, both those guys are day 3 picks. Caleb Williams, what you look at for the full career in college and the intangibles that he shows and that off-script ability, he is deserving of being the quarterback one. He is the 1-on-1 in all my Superflex mocks that I would do, any draft I would do. Caleb Williams, write it down, quarterback one. It's still there. It's in stone throughout the draft. Now, the other guy who I feel pretty similar about is Marvin Harrison Jr. at the wide receiver position. Another guy who just has put together such an impressive career in college. Did not play this year with a quarterback like he played last year with C.J. Stroud. Still put together a still impressive season for Ohio State and catching passes from Kyle McCord, who is now the quarterback at Syracuse, Mike. Syracuse. So Marvin Harrison Jr., another guy, I know there's been some discourse about him, and I think some prospect fatigue has set in about Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's no offense at all to Malik Neighbors, but I think Marvin Harrison Jr., what he's put on throughout his career has been really impressive. You got to take that into account. And also the bloodlines. You know I love the bloodlines, Mike. It means something. It really does. Even if it's just minuscule, it just gives you that little extra edge. So tier one, those are my 2 prospects that you could label as generational. If you don't want to throw the term around, near generational. Both of them very good. I just want to say that both of these guys come into the NFL top 10 in their position in Dynasty. Marvin Harrison, you could argue possibly top 5 if he has a really nice landing spot.
Do you have a preferred landing spot for Marvin Harrison?
I like the Cardinals a lot as a landing spot. That seems like the mock lock right now for Marvin Harrison Jr. And, being the wide receiver 1 for Kyler Murray moving forward in a dome, I don't dislike that at all. That sounds really nice.
DeAndre Hopkins put up some good numbers in
Arizona. He sure did. I would be more than happy to see Marvin Harrison Jr. be there.
Let's move on to tier 2. Nate, who is in your tier 2 of players here?
We got another quarterback in here, Drake May. Mike, is Drake May still your quarterback 1?
It's close. I think I'm leaning more towards Caleb Williams right now, though. Okay. But like I said, it's close. And I like both of these guys as prospects. And I don't think we have a perfect quarterback prospect right now.
So Drake May, though, he's got the big arm. He's got the athleticism. He's been compared to Justin Herbert with his arm and his athleticism, ability to move around in the pocket. This is another guy that has put on multiple years of film that we've seen him be an impressive quarterback. And this year, he didn't have the wide receiver talent he even had last year. There's a common trend with these guys at the top that we're seeing some prospect fatigue on is they still performed really well this year, but usually with less talent around them. And that's actually pretty impressive to, keep up similar numbers and have less talent around you. Drake May lost Josh Downs. Devontae Walker came in, but he came in halfway through the season and didn't really get to work much with the team, wasn't really part of the offense, because they didn't know if they could even have him play the season. So that offense was not what it was, the year before when he came on and had his breakout year. All that to be said, Drake May, still my quarterback too. I think he's still kind of in a different tier than the next couple quarterbacks. They're in the spoiler alert. These other quarterbacks are not in this tier with Drake May. This is the only quarterback in tier 2 for me. And it's testament to Drake May and his athleticism, his ability to read the defense and make the throws in the intermediate areas of the field, which is really impressive and can make the difference for you at the NFL. And it's also a testament to the wide receivers in this tier, Mike. Because in this tier, I have Malik Neighbors and I also have Rome Odunze. And both of these wide receivers, they are close to that tier 1. Not quite, but it puts him here in this tier 2, and this tier 2 is really, really good. And that's why I was saying it's a testament to Drake May and his ability to be in this tier, but also these wide receivers. I would take them over some of these other quarterbacks, being team dependent wise, but I would take them over some of these other quarterbacks in this draft just because of how good I feel about their chances at being a top 12 wide receiver in Dynasty, being able to put up 20-something fantasy points in a week, and being true cornerstones to build my wide receiver position around and my Dynasty team around. And the other quarterbacks, it's unlikely, we might see 4 or 5 quarterbacks go in the first round this year. It's unlikely all of them pan out. We saw 5 quarterbacks go in the first round a couple years ago. For some of them, it really hasn't panned out. Trey Lance, Mac Jones. It's tough sometimes. Neighbors and Odunze, though, top quality wide receivers. Neighbors, his athleticism and what he did at LSU this year certainly should have been the Blanikoff winner in my eyes. Marvin Harrison Jr. did win that. And then Rome Odunze, I feel like one of the most pro-ready players in this draft, just not physically, but also mentally. I don't know if you saw, but at the Combine, he was out there running the 3-cone drill after everyone had left because he was trying to get his target of 6.6, but he just couldn't quite get it. So he was out there trying. Everything that we've heard about Rome Odunze is that he is a pro's pro. He is all up there above the shoulders. And I love seeing a guy like that who competes at the highest level and has that, that drive. And with his ability and all-around athleticism, I feel so good about that guy being a top wide receiver.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you look at ADP, or Dynasty Rewind ADP, the lowest of this tier is Rome Odunze. You're forgetting someone here. Just to recap, your tier 2, we got Drake May, Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. Nate, a lot of people would say that you're neglecting Jaden Daniels here, but he is in your next tier. So why don't we move on to your next tier, and you could explain why he's here and not a little bit higher.
Sure. Yeah. So this is my tier 3, and this kind of tier 3, it rounds out our larger tier of the first 8, 9 picks, depending on maybe some of your drafts, but like the top 8 picks in your first round. This is like the tier you want to be in, and it's broken down for me into these 3 tiers. And this is the third tier of that larger tier, and it's Jaden Daniels, who I think is a very athletic quarterback. He showed off a really good arm and accuracy this year with LSU, but I'm a little bit worried about it taking a while for him to get to this point. He did put up a Heisman season, so like I said, I still have this guy very highly rated, but some more question marks as it took him a while to get to this point. This was his best season by far. Like we've talked about, how the stats from this year, you don't really see them across any other season. He never had the production that we saw this year with LSU. While he certainly helped raise the stock of the wide receivers at LSU, there's 2 first-round wide receivers he was throwing to. So, a lot of talent around him, not something we necessarily said about some of these other quarterbacks we talked about already. So, with Jaden Daniels, I still think there's a ton of upside with him, especially with his rushing ability in fantasy football. And that keeps him in this top tier for me. And the fact that it sounds like he's probably going to be a top 5 pick. I like that kind of upside. I like that investment. I'm definitely going to keep him in this tier. But there's another quarterback that's entered the chat, Mike. J.J. McCarthy.
This is our riser right here. I mean, he was not considered this pre-combine by a lot of people, but look at him moving up your tiers.
Yeah, and I was talking about him a month ago, being like a top 15 pick, trying to tell people that, hey, J.J. McCarthy is on the move. He's moving up the board. I don't know if I saw him this high after the combine. Rumor has it some teams, not only have him as their, quarterback 3 in the draft, they might have him as their quarterback 2, even quarterback 1. There's, there's top 5 rumors around J.J. McCarthy right now. There's rumors that the NFL draft would go 1, 2, 3, 4, quarterback, Mike. Whatever it ends up being, it sure sounds like J.J. McCarthy is not just a top 15 pick at this point. He's a top 10 pick, possibly a top 5 pick.
But I wonder if he gets a higher draft capital, top 10 draft capital, if he bounces any one of these other quarterbacks out.
I think in some drafts you're definitely going to see him be the quarterback 3, quarterback 2. Awesome. It's going to become like a pick your flavor kind of thing at the quarterback position this year, I think, between what you think of the player themselves as well as the situation around them. It's obviously a bit different going to the Raiders, where you might have Josh Jacobs, Jacoby Myers, Devontae Adams around you, or going to the Broncos, where you have Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. They're fun little receivers themselves, but not quite. Devontae Adams. Greg Dulcich is there.
Marvin Mims, come on.
Hey, they've definitely got some talent. But, I do find it very interesting, and I like J.J. McCarthy as a prospect as well. I know that there's question marks. Maybe a lot wasn't asked of him very often, but he delivered consistently whenever anything was asked of him. And from everything we've heard from Jim Harbaugh, he's a pro's pro as well, incredible mentality. Sounds like teams love him and love the tools that he has. He's young. He's a winner. Teams love that, and I like it too, Mike, to be honest. So,
if your NFL team needs a quarterback, this year's a really good time to
good
do
time
one.
to
It's
try.
not like the Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis. And Matt Corral was in that one too,
Oh,
right?
yes. Yep.
Wasn't Brock Purdy in that draft class too?
Oh, yeah. He
Yeah,
was. He was
he
the best
ended up
quarterback in
being
that draft class.
the best. Who would have thought, right?
Who would have
You
thought?
want to round out this tier for us, Nate?
I do. One last player I'm sure everyone knows who we haven't talked about at this point, and it is the tight end Brock Bowers. He did not run at the combine. He did weigh in. He weighed in enough for me. You know, there were some questions like him standing next to Gronk. He looked small next to Gronk. Most tight ends, even in the NFL, look small next to Gronk. Gronk was a large tight end. He's like 6'6", 265. That is above average for an NFL tight end. A lot of tight ends these days are about 6'4", 245, which is basically, I believe, exactly what Jatavion Sanders weighed in as.
You nailed it, by the way. 6'6", 265 is his official listing.
He's a big guy. Rounding out tier 3, Brock Bowers, I think, is going to come in. You know, he's obviously going to be a top 10 tight end in your dynasty right away, probably top 5 for some people. It's going to depend a little bit on landing spot and draft capital. Is he that top 10 pick? Is he more of a top 20 pick? He's kind of been all over the board in mock drafts. I've seen anywhere from 6, 7, 8, all the way down to like 18, which is to the Bengals. So, you know, if he goes to the Bengals, you're feeling pretty good about that landing spot. So that, you know, whether you not have a tight end premium or not, if you have a tight end premium, you can move him up probably in the tier 2 with a good landing spot. But without the tight end premium, I still think you have to keep him in this top tier, this top large tier of 8 guys, because he's basically a wide receiver playing tight end. And I think he's going to put up production kind of similar to that.
But now moving on, I got a question for you right in the middle of this tier here. We'll get there, but who do you got in tier 4?
Yeah, this is a fun tier for me. I got Brian Thomas Jr., who I think really solidified himself as the wide receiver 4 in this draft class for me, with a really impressive showing at the combine. I believe he ran a 4.35, Mike. I think he might have had over 40 inches on the vertical as well, which those two numbers look really good for me, especially when he comes in 6'2", 205 pounds. Brian Thomas Jr., I like the tape. I like the showing he at the combine. I like the measurables. Everything keeps checking the boxes. And his pre-draft process has just continued to go great, I would say. And he's kind of another player that, with this consistent performance over the pre-draft process, has risen up boards and risen up mocks as well, where he started out the pre-draft process kind of in the mid to late 20s, end of the first round. Now we're seeing him in the teens, which, Mike, there's a lot of wide receivers in this free agency class are getting franchise tagged or extended. And the wide receiver free agent market is not what it was just a couple weeks ago. And what that means is that if you want to find a wide receiver for your young quarterback that you've invested in, it's going to have to be in the draft, which is going to just create more and more demand for these wide receivers. We've already seen them flying off the boards the last couple of years. Rumors we might have another 7, 8, 9 wide receivers in this year's first round. We're going to see a lot of first round wide receivers, I think. And, you know, if Brian Thomas is one of 6, 7 wide receivers, it just goes to show how impressive this class is. But I still think that at this point, he's looking like a top 15 pick. I'm not sure where he's going, but I think it's going to be a really good spot where he can, you know, be a contributor for an offense.
Let's move on, because this is the question mark I have.
Yeah, it's a good one. Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey here in my tier 4. I'm a big McConkey fan, man.
I can see that.
Ladd, he's got a very impressive yards per route run. He was 8th in the NCAA in yards per route run. And he showed his athleticism, really showed his athleticism at the NFL Combine, ran a 4.39. Mike, one of the 9 wide receivers to run under a 4.4. And his ability to play inside, outside, create yards after the catch. He's really a wide receiver that, for me, does it all. Just had some health issues that came up while he was at Georgia, kind of kept him off the field. But if he clears the medicals and he gets the draft capital that I'm expecting him to get, like right now, I'm thinking like early second. But I was just talking about possibly 7, 8 wide receivers in the first round. If that happens, Ladd McConkey could be one of those at the back half of the first round. I think you look at the film, you look at the analytics, and you take the name Ladd McConkey out of it, and he has every right to arguably be in this tier. I'm going to put him there.
I see your logic. I just think it's a bit rich for me personally. But you are a man of your convictions, so, you know. But we got our first running back sighting here, Nate.
We do. Jonathan Brooks, who's my RB1. And Jonathan Brooks is the only running back in this draft class that I'm going to be really into no matter the landing spot.
Okay, I get it.
And that's just how I'm going to describe the fact that he is the RB1 in this class. He shows the fact that he can be the best all-around running back to me. He offers the most to a team, to be able to handle multiple roles out of a backfield, be able to handle volume, and be able to be someone that an offense can rely upon, not just be a role player within a team, be a player that plays a part. But Jonathan Brooks, you can kind of build an offense around, I think. So with that, that makes him my RB1. That puts him into this top tier before we get to any other running backs. And I know there's the ACL injury, but talking to Jonathan Brooks, not myself, but reporters at the Combine, he reported that he would be ready by training camp. So
interesting.
I love hearing the sound of that. Sounds like everything's going pretty well. Remember, the Dallas Cowboys team doctors did do the knee surgery for Jonathan Brooks. So he had the top guys doing this surgery. It's a little bit different. I mean, sure, University of Texas probably has some really good doctors themselves, but Jonathan Brooks seems like he's wheels up through this pre-draft process, even though he's not testing.
Nate, your biggest faller, I think we could say this is your personal biggest faller, is in tier 5. Is your heart breaking a little bit?
A little bit. With the rise of J.J. McCarthy, it's unfortunately kicked out Bo Nix as the quarterback 4 in this draft class, and honestly has put his first-round draft capital on shaky ground. I'm not sure if we see 5 quarterbacks in the first round. I still think there's plenty of chance of that, because if we see 4 of them go in the first 10 picks, first 5 picks, then there's a lot of picks before the second round that there could be a quarterback picked up. And there's a lot of quarterback needy teams. So I keep Bo Nix here in tier 5 with some pretty good wide receivers, because I still think there's a chance that Bo Nix has first round draft capital. Now, there's not another quarterback in this tier. So spoiler alert, Michael Penix Jr. is not here with Bo Nix. I don't think Michael Penix Jr. is a first-round quarterback. Between his age, his injury history, and the film, I think he's a really good college quarterback who has some NFL upside, but I think he's a second-round quarterback. I think Bo Nix still has that potential to be a first-round quarterback. And with that, if he gets that draft capital, he is sitting here at tier 5 for me, maybe back in the tier 4. If he doesn't get it and he's a day 2 pick, he might be falling down another tier. He's kind of here in the middle for me right now as we're trying to see what's going to happen.
Let me ask you this then. If both Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. are day 2 picks, would you be inclined to lean more one way than the other?
I would still prefer Bo Nix myself, personally.
Okay. All right. So the next guy you have on here is somebody, actually the next 2 receivers I would probably prefer over Ladd McConkey. But why don't you talk about our next wide receiver that we got here in this tier, Nate?
Yeah, I could see that. It's not a large gap between these wide receivers from the last tier to this tier. There's a lot of talent in this class, but we got to pick it out somehow. And next up, I got Troy Franklin, impressive wide receiver who ran pretty much as fast as we thought he was going to run at the Combine, but he just didn't do better than we thought. So because of that, he kind of took a step back in some people's mind.
Oh, so yeah, hey, he did exactly as we thought. So you suck now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, but he didn't go out there and run like a low 4.3 and surprise us like some of these other guys did. It's a shame if you can't keep up with the pack. If you can't impress, maybe you are falling behind. We're gonna do our best not to double count the NFL Combine here. And Troy Franklin's fast. He proved he's fast. He's just not like elite fast, but he still has great game speed. He's still got good hands. He's still a good route runner. I still like Troy Franklin a good bit. And what he shows, I think he's a very good all-around wide receiver. Maybe not elite in different areas of his game, but I think he is someone that can be a really solid contributor for a team and probably really be like a top 36 wide receiver for your dynasty team. I think he has possible top 24 upside depending on the situation, but I think I would have him locked in as a top 36 wide receiver, honestly, with just his floor. I think it's a really good floor with Troy Franklin.
Now, you got 2 more guys in this tier. Tell us who they are.
I do. I got the fastest wide receiver in the football landscape right now, and that's Xavier Worthy. Ran a 4.21.
Catch the ball consistently.
If he could catch the ball consistently. Hey, look, his drop rate went down this year, Mike, so maybe we're on the way there.
That is true.
One of my biggest question marks with Xavier Worthy, because he's shown us production since his freshman year, almost at 1,000 yards for Texas his freshman year, 18 years old playing in the Big 12. Xavier Worthy's been a really good wide receiver for 3 years now in college. We haven't really seen him take that next step up. And that's going to be one of the questions as he goes into the NFL. Is he able to translate it and take that step up to be a really good NFL wide receiver. If not, I think you're still okay because he's really fast. And I think he's still got a pretty decent floor. You look at some of the other wide receivers that have run the 4.2s. I think Xavier Worthy's floor is a lot higher than a lot of those other guys. He's a much better prospect coming out. Has been much more productive than any of those guys that have run 4.2s, except outside of maybe Henry Ruggs. He was pretty productive at Alabama, but Xavier Worthy, more productive than even him. I like Xavier Worthy a lot. Have him here as well as his teammate Adonai Mitchell. Mike Adonai Mitchell showed off in a really impressive athletic combine. Kind of looked like DK Metcalf out there with how he was running around. These two wide receivers, very athletic. I don't know what Quinn Ewers was doing out there, why he couldn't put up bigger numbers with these guys he was throwing to. But I think NFL teams are going to like these guys.
Nate, let's get right back into tier 6. Hey, we got a Michael Penix sighting.
We do. Michael Penix Jr. is here. Someone that I actually am interested in if he is a second-round pick as a kind of flyer. Right now, having where he is in my tier, this is a little bit baked in. Okay, there's a possibility he gets first-round upside. If he doesn't, if he ends up being a second-round pick, probably going to go down another tier for me just because there's already like 4 or 5 other quarterbacks in this draft class I'd rather pick up before him. But Michael Penix Jr., I think he's going to be at worst a second-round pick. He keeps getting mocked to the Raiders. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it could actually be a nice little pairing there. I think Michael Penix Jr. is going to start at some point. So I think he's worth a flyer. I put him here in the tier 6 with some running backs, Mike. We get to the running backs. And this is how I tier right now before the draft. We don't have draft capital. We don't have landing spots. So I threw 3 running backs in here because I kind of have them all in the same tier, and they haven't had draft capital and landing spots to pick them out and let me pick one over the other. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, this guy is certainly going to be better than this guy without knowing anything about their future, really, and where they're going to be. I don't feel that good about the differences in talent in this running back class. There's a lot of good talent all mixed in this class, and it's going to depend on what the NFL does with it before we know what to do with it. Starting off with this running back tier, you could call it, plus Michael Penix Jr. Trey Benson, Mike. You like Trey Benson a good bit yourself, and he showed up and showed out at the NFL Combine. You tell me why you like Trey Benson.
I mean, he's definitely more physical than I expected him to be. He's a pretty big dude. If I don't have his measurements in front of me, I believe he's 6 foot, over 220 pounds, if I'm correct. Again, I don't have his profile card right in front of me. One thing I like about Trey Benson, though, is he's an above average receiving back. I think that's something that doesn't get mentioned. I'm not saying he's going to be a 3-down running back because that seems to be going by the wayside, but I think he has the skill set to be a 3-down running back. And I love his game. I heard a lot of people talking about his vision wasn't that good. I didn't see that when I watched the film.
That's where I come into play with Trey Benson. I agree with basically everything you said, but then the vision is what gives me like the little red flag.
We'll have to watch some Trey Benson film together. How's that sound?
Yeah, we will have to do that. Should do that. Mike. All right. Well, we got Trey Benson in there. He's a home run hitter, man. That's for sure. He can break off some big plays. Also, we got maybe my favorite running back in the draft class, Marshawn Lloyd. I love Marshawn Lloyd. He's become an auto pick for me at the end of the second round in our mocks that we've been doing with the Patreon. And Marshawn Lloyd came in 5'8.5", 220 pounds, put up 25 reps on the bench press, Mike, and ran a 4.4. So Marshawn Lloyd, someone I'm a real big fan of, have been a big fan of, and he came into the combine and people took notice of it because let's be honest, this running back class didn't test that well overall. There was a lot of slow runners, a lot of guys that kind of disappointed. Marshawn Lloyd did the opposite of that. He looked impressive. He was fast and big. I think he might have locked himself into some day 2 draft capital, Mike.
Okay. I don't hate it. I think you might be a bit more of a Marshawn Lloyd fan than I am. There's a guy in your next tier that I would probably put over him, but we'll get there. But give me your last player in this tier. Probably, honestly, as much as I love Trey Benson, this guy's probably my favorite player that you have in this tier.
Yeah, I think this guy was a loser of the draft for a lot of people, but I dove into the stats, not too much for me. Bucky Irving out of Oregon. I still have him as one of my more favorite running backs in this class. His ability to make people miss, his lateral agility, his ability as a receiver to constantly be a threat out of the backfield. And he ran a slowish 40, Mike, we'll call it a 4.55 because he came in at 5'8". So you look at like the size, speed, stuff, and you're like, oh, it's a little slow for a guy who's that small. But you look at his 10-yard split. Mike, he ran a 1.54 10-yard split, which was among the best in the class. Bucky Irving is fast. He just doesn't have a lot of long speed. So he wasn't able to win the 40 because after 20 yards, he didn't really accelerate too much more. But that first 20 yards, that first 10 yards, that's where Bucky wins. And 98% of the time, that's all you ever need in a football play.
If you look at the way he plays, though, I feel like his play speed is much better.
Yeah, he's twitchy.
He is. Nate, let's close it out with your 7th tier. Who do you got for us? Looks like your first player here was definitely a riser after the combine.
Yeah, he looked good at the combine. I was impressed because this is someone that we've talked about maybe not being impressive athletically, still tested well. And the farther that Blake Corum gets away from the injury, the better. And Blake Corum looked good at the combine. There's no questions about he looked good all around. There's no questions about his vision for me. I think he's got pretty good vision. He used the Michigan offensive line pretty well. But for me, it's always been about the explosiveness and the fact that his missed tackles force really, really went down in 2023 after the knee injury. But hey, you can come back from a knee injury. Sometimes it takes a year or two. So, if this is him coming back out of that knee injury to be the player that he was before, then you're going to get a value in the draft most likely. So Blake Corum, he has moved up in my rankings. He's now here in tier 7 with a couple of the running backs. The next one, another riser, Mike, Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, who was one of the best this weekend at the combine. Put up some of the best numbers in the 40-yard dash, the vertical, the broad jump, just an athletic freak. He has been getting the Alvin Kamara comps because they're both from Tennessee, I think, because I don't really see Alvin Kamara when I look at Jalen Wright.
I don't see that either.
I don't think he's on that tier of a running back. I like him, but don't let the Tennessee orange fool you into thinking he's Alvin Kamara. But very athletic, can break off some really big runs where no one's going to touch him and no one's going to catch him. Jalen Wright, someone definitely moving my board for the running backs. And the last running back, Mike, I have in this tier, unfortunately did not run at the combine. I was a little disappointed, but Braylon Allen, he's been impressive throughout his entire career. We know he's super athletic. We know he's super strong. He's a big guy who's knocked over a lot of people on film, and he's also made a lot of noise in the gym room where, you can go on Wisconsin's Twitter or their YouTube and you can see, Braylon Allen squatting an just imaginable amount of weight as like a 17-year-old in their gym. It's pretty ridiculous. So I was a little disappointed not to see him run the 40. I thought that would be really good for him, kind of have like an A.J. Dillon-esque combine. You can remember, Mike, A.J. Dillon coming into the NFL combine. No one really talked about A.J. Dillon. There's a couple of people that liked him in the fantasy community, but he was
out there.
He was looked as a couple tiers down at the running back position, came out, had an incredible 40 and incredible testing at the combine overall at his weight, especially, and came out of that, ended up being a day 2 pick. Now, I think Braylon Allen has been a lot better as a prospect than A.J. Dillon, but I don't know if Braylon Allen's locked in as a day 2 pick at this point. I think he has the talent, but I think there's questions about, what's he going to give to you as a receiver? And in today's modern NFL, what is the value of a Braylon Allen? It might unfortunately just be a 4th rounder.
Jalen Wright was the guy that I would have put up over Sean Lloyd, to just go back to that. But you got 3 more players left in this tier, and then we'll wrap it up. 3
more players, Mike. So Keon Coleman is my next guy here. And we've talked about Keon Coleman a whole bunch on this channel. Everywhere from him being in that top 12 in the first round in some of our mocks, where we were talking about why are we putting him here in the first round. Now he's fallen to a bit better value, I think, where he really should be. And for me, that's somewhere like in the mid to almost late second round. He's got the athleticism. I know his 40 wasn't great, but his technique was awful. And that might be a red flag right there. But then he looked really good on the gauntlet. He ran like 20 miles an hour on the gauntlet, which was like best in the class. So, play speed versus gym speed, whatever, you can worry about that if you really want to. Doesn't really change too much for Keon Coleman for me. I still think he's athletic, maybe a little, I don't want to say awkward, but not as smooth as you would want athletically, but still athletic. He's still learning the position. He was a basketball player for a while too. So Keon Coleman, I like the upside there, but I just have enough question marks where it's keeping him down in this tier for me. And then Xavier Legette, who's, I could actually say a lot of the same things here for. He's a guy that I really love the film for, love the measurables for, love the testing for. He is big and scary and strong, but it took him 5 years to figure out the wide receiver position. And that's just going to be a question mark that keeps him down here as well. I think both these guys have huge upside and could, we look back 3 years from now, we could say, hey, these guys were steals at the back end of the second round. But we could also look back very easily, Mike, And I think these guys are very, bustable players just with how their
Agree.
profiles are set up. So, Mike, I will finish it off. The last player we have here, another tight end, our second tight end of the day, and that's Ja'Tavion Sanders. He ran under a 5.7, which checks the box for me. Came in 6'4", 245.
Wait. Did you say under a 5.7?
Under a 4.7. If I said 5.6, 5.7,
you
I
said
apologize.
5.7. I was like, are we talking about is that a
Jalen
Jalen
Weidemeyer?
I was
Man,
like, he's still taking strays out there from Nate.
Jalen Weidemeyer. What a disappointment, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, practice the 40. That would make my day. Ja'Tavion Sanders, though, you talk about the athleticism they had at Texas. He checks that box. He's an athletic tight end. Maybe disappointed some people because he wasn't uber athletic, like maybe some people expected him to be. But I also think that you run under a 4.7, Mike, and you're above average for a tight end. So, this is another one of those guys where he ran fast enough, but he just didn't impress people. So they're kind of double counting the combine.
I will say, too, he has an innate ability to just get open. And for a man that large, I really think that you don't need to be super athletic to be a productive tight end. I don't think Jake Ferguson is super athletic, to be honest with you. We've seen guys. What's that?
I don't think Dalton Schultz is super athletic either.
He's not, and we've seen Tyler Boyd be productive in the past too. Gerald Everett. These are guys that are not super athletic, but JT Sanders, he gets open on these short little routes. He's a good blocker. I saw them use him as a fullback as well too. I'm not worried about that at all. He's a super productive guy. And if you always want to look at our rankings, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Click the tier that's most appropriate for you, or check out the 7-day trial. Till next time, everybody. For Nate, I'm Mike. Thanks for listening.